Coming up on this Monday edition of Daybreak, South Korea, the United States and China are discussing conditions to resume the six-party talks on denuclearizing North Korea. South Korea and the United States have agreed to set the timing of and conditions for the transfer of wartime control of South Korean troops from Washington to Seoul by October. Plus, turnout rates from the two-day early voting period for the June 4th local elections show only a slight disparity between the younger and older generations. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Monday, June 2nd here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, South Korea's chief nuclear envoy says he's discussing the conditions under which to resume the six-party talks on denuclearizing North Korea with the US and China. In Washington on Sunday, Hwang Joon-kook said talks with Pyongyang cannot restart unconditionally after the regime conducted 3 nuclear tests, 2 of which took place since the talks were suspended 5 years ago. The envoy's remarks hint at possible progress on the matter ahead of Chinese President Xi Jinping's expected visit to Seoul later this month. As for Tokyo agreeing to lift sanctions if Pyongyang reopens a probe into the abduction of Japanese nationals, Hwang said Seoul and Washington continue to cooperate with Tokyo on the north and that he plans to exchange assessments of the deal with officials in Washington. Hwang is set to meet US negotiator Glyn Davies on Monday. The South Korean government is calling on Pyongyang to release a South Korean missionary who has been sentenced to life with hard labor. In a statement Sunday, Seoul's Unification Ministry said it was extremely regrettable the North has ignored the South's calls to free Kim Jong-uk and instead put him on trial. North Korea state media said Saturday that the missionary had admitted to committing religious acts against the state. Kim was arrested by the North last October on charges of espionage and trying to set up underground churches in the North. The Unification Ministry said North Korea's latest measures were a serious violation of human rights and asked that Kim be allowed contact with his family and a lawyer until he is freed. President Park Geunhye has tapped current Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin as her new top security advisor. Referring to his 4-year tenure as defense chief, the presidential office said Kim's field experience and years of policy making will help him faithfully carry out his duties as the head of the National Security Office. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Han Min-gu, who is highly respected within the military, has been nominated to replace Kim. The nomination comes 10 days after both the president's top security advisor and the intelligence chief stepped down amid government reforms. President Park is thought to have named a candidate for one of the two posts amid rising concerns about a prolonged vacancy in the security control tower and continuous threats from North Korea. And the defense chiefs of South Korea and the US have agreed to set the timing and conditions for the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul by October. Experts expect the transfer date will be sometime in early 2020. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul topped the agenda of talks between Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin and U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel at the ongoing Asia Security Summit, Shangri-La Dialogue, in Singapore over the weekend.
Korea and the U.S. have agreed to set the date and conditions for the transfer by the annual security consultative meeting in October. We have been conducting numerous working-level talks and are scheduled to hold several more rounds of talks.
Experts say the transfer is likely to be pushed back 5 to 7 years and will take place in early 2020. That's the time when Korea air and missile defense system, which could counter missiles and nuclear weapons from Pyongyang, is scheduled to be implemented. The question of whether the U.S.-led missile defense system will be implemented in Korea was not discussed during the meeting. Korea's defense ministry says there were no opposing views on Korea setting up its own missile defense system.
As we've said in the past, we will establish our own missile defense system while enhancing interoperability with the U.S. Japan will not be included in our plan.
In related news, Kim said that Japan could exercise its collective self-defense outside the theater of South Korea's operations, a thinly veiled warning that Japanese self-defense forces will not be admitted to South Korea unless requested by Seoul. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery and their families from 8 different countries will call on the Japanese government today to settle the issue once and for all. The Korean Council representing the victims says the former sex slaves, their families and civic activists plan to demonstrate in front of the Japanese Diet's lower house on this Monday. They will also condemn Tokyo's efforts to deny that Japan had coerced the women into military prostitution by trying to review an apology statement from the early 1990s. The victims from countries like Korea, China, the Philippines and Indonesia will then give testimonies and deliver a written request to the Japanese government to take legal responsibility and to compensate.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, President Park Geunhye attended a prayer service on Sunday where she consoled the families of the victims of the Seoul ferry disaster and prayed for the return of the 16 people still missing, thanking local churches for their volunteer work, fundraising efforts and prayers following the accident. The president then vowed to bolster the national safety system to prevent a similar disaster happening again. She also promised that recovery efforts will continue until every last missing passenger is found. The church is hosting the service released a letter in which they pledged to help the country overcome its grief and build a safer and happier nation based on principles and righteousness. Now, Korea's rival political parties have been having their say on last week's 2-day early voting period for this Wednesday's local elections. The two sides have been poring over which age groups headed to the polls as the younger generation tend to lean towards the Liberal Party and the older generation, the more Conservative Party. Hwang Joon-kook has more.
After a whopping 11.5% of Korea's eligible voters cast ballots during 2 days of early voting for the upcoming local elections, attention now is focused on which age groups had the best turnout. Voter turnout was the highest at nearly 16% among the youngest voting group, who usually tend to be progressive. They were followed by those in their 60s at 12%, who tend to lean conservative. Turnout was lower among voters in their 30s and 40s. The turnout was similar for voters in their 20s and 30s combined and for those in their 50s and above. Neither the ruling nor main opposition party seemed to be satisfied with the figures.
It's hard to tell which party will benefit the most from the early voting turnout. A narrow-minded analysis by politicians could lead voters to misjudge the situation.
However, the ruling Saenuri party did express its concerns about the high voter turnout among young people, while the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy said the number isn't actually that high, considering that the majority of the country's 35,000 soldiers are part of the 16% of people who voted in advance.
Overall, the voter turnout among those in their 30s and 40s is low. We're keeping an eye on that, as a percentage is 2.5% to 3% lower than that of those in their 50s and 60s.
Experts say the party's official statements on the early voting turnout seem like a typical strategy to boost support in the days before an election. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, financial authorities are keeping a very close eye on the 3 credit card companies that recently resumed operations after a 3-month business suspension following the largest personal data leak in Korea's history. They will also offer greater incentives for the reporting of illegal practices to entice customers and order firms to send text messages to their customers when a transaction is made on their card. Our Kim Min-ji has this report.
This footage from 2011 shows a credit card issuer urging passers-by to sign up for a new credit card, saying they will receive free baseball tickets if they do. This is illegal as the value of the freebie exceeds the annual membership fee of roughly $10. To prevent such practices, financial authorities implemented an incentive reporting system back in 2012. The system, however, proved to be ineffective as it was complicated and the incentives were low. But now the Financial Supervisory Service has raised the incentive to 5 times the original amount. They say people who report on illegal methods to entice customers, such as issuing credit cards on the street or offering excessive giveaways, will be able to receive roughly $490 in incentives, up from $98. The stricter measures are part of efforts to prevent credit card companies who recently resumed business operations from engaging in aggressive promotional activities. 3 of the nation's leading credit card firms, KB Kookmin Card, Lotte Card, and NH Nongyap Card, have resumed operations after a 3-month business suspension for their involvement in the biggest personal data leak in Korean history. Financial authorities will also make card companies offer free text message alerts to their customers when they make purchases of over $50 on their cards. Card companies say the messaging service will cost them millions of dollars, but with profits on the rise from last year, it seems they will begin offering the service in coming weeks. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, the Korean government is looking to implement a creative economy in the space industry. It plans to use satellite information to come up with measures to protect citizens, but also national assets. Our Paul Lee tells us more.
The Korean government is looking to the stars with a new set of advanced space policies. The Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning agreed to implement 2 plans regarding the use of satellite information and preparations for space threats at the 7th National Space Committee, a deliberative body for space development. Science Minister Choi Moon-gi said the plans are part of efforts to implement a creative economy in the space industry and protect national security and space assets. The government plans to establish a special organization that will oversee the management and use of satellite information by 2015. As part of its Satellite Information 3.0 campaign, the government is also seeking to establish a one-stop platform where the public will be able to search for satellite information. The platform is also expected to create new businesses and public services. As for space threats, which include space objects falling to Earth and collisions between satellites and space wreckage, the ministry noted that Korea lagged behind advanced nations. The government will adopt a 10-year plan to tackle such threats for the protection of citizens and space assets. It plans to develop technology to monitor and assess threats and develop the necessary infrastructure. In order to achieve its goals, the government also plans to strengthen cooperation with the U.S. and Europe in these fields and expand its R&D to foster experts. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
Now, in other scientific news, researchers here in Korea have developed a new type of antibiotic film that kills bacteria and germs in a matter of minutes, and this saves both time and money. Our Sun Jung-in shows us how it works.
This is an antibiotic nanofilm newly developed by local researchers. When they dribble a few drops that contain germs onto it, most of the bacteria die within 5 minutes. Looking through the microscope, the germs are destroyed. The sharp, rough surface of the nanofilm acts like the edge of a knife, ripping apart the cell wall of bacteria on contact.
These blades are literally nano-size, which means it causes no harm when a person touches it. But when it is brushed against bacteria, their cell walls are torn off, which eventually kills them.
It takes over an hour to kill germs via oxidation, but it takes just 50 minutes using this new wall-destroying material. It uses a cheaper version of nanographene and titanium oxide, which costs almost 1/10 the amount of commonly used silver nanoparticles. Experts believe they can expand their research to come up with other types of sterilizing products for sanitation in the city, including wastewater treatment.
Using this new type of technology, we anticipate to easily get rid of bacteria lurking at public facilities, such as on handles or seats in buses, subways, and bathrooms.
The results have been featured in the renowned academic journal, Advanced Functional Materials. 손정인, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following this morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the News Center. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning, Mark. The last remaining American prisoner of war held by Taliban forces in Afghanistan is now a free man following a swap deal for 5 Taliban militants. Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl had been held captive for nearly 5 years. Several dozen U.S. Special Operations Forces were deployed to secure his release in eastern Afghanistan over the weekend. Explaining the decision, U.S. officials said the 28-year-old had deteriorating health and his safety appeared to be in jeopardy. U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said the country did not negotiate with terrorists, saying getting your prisoners back was a normal process. He added that he hoped the exchange would lead to further reconciliatory breakthroughs with the Taliban. Nonetheless, the deal is coming under fire from some Republicans. Arizona Senator John McCain said the 5 freed Taliban militants out of the Guantanamo Bay prison were, quote, the hardest of the hardcore. The Frenchman being held for a deadly shooting at a Brussels Jewish museum has admitted to the attacks, according to Belgian prosecutors. They said 29-year-old Mehdi Namouche had in his possession a video in which he apparently claimed responsibility for the strike when he was arrested at a train station in southern France on Friday, along with firearms and ammunition. The May 24th shooting had killed 3 and left 1 person in critical condition and had raised alarm at various Jewish sites across Belgium. Prosecutors also said Namouche had spent over a year in Syria and had links to radical Islamists. Thousands of security forces were deployed in Bangkok on Sunday following small-scale protests by the country's pro-government red shirts denouncing the military coup. The demonstrations were organized by a veteran social activist who supports ousted Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra, but they broke up a couple hours later after some 5,700 soldiers and police with riot shields secured key intersections. The military junta has banned political gatherings of 5 people or more, but small protests have taken place almost daily in the capital city since the coup's launch on May 22nd. 2 Italian priests and a Canadian nun arrived in Cameroon's capital Sunday after being freed from their captors who had held them for nearly 2 months. They were abducted by gunmen in the parish of Marua near Cameroon's border with Nigeria in early April. Though no group has claimed responsibility, the Nigerian militant group Boko Haram is suspected. No details of the circumstances of their release were given. The clerics had been working on improving water supplies and fighting the spread of HIV in Cameroon.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off with the Minsk Rhythmic Gymnastics World Cup, which took place over the weekend. And just like she did in the previous 8 consecutive World Cup events, Son Yeon-jae finished off on the podium once again. Now, not the best of her performance in Belarus, but the 20-year-old rhythmic gymnast was still able to finish off with a couple of medals as she won the silver medal in the hoop event after scoring 17.8833 points Not only that, she was also able to win the bronze medal, this time over in the ribbon event, after scoring 17.7833 points. Now, despite struggling in the ball event and failing to advance to the finals for that event, Son Yeon-jae has now won a medal in 9 consecutive World Cup events. And now moving over to the majors, where LA Dodgers' Lee Hyun-jin earned the 6th win of the season, this time against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, he didn't get close to pitching a perfect game this time, but still pitched 6 solid innings, giving up just 2 runs while striking out 4. But his 6th win of the season was a lot easier this time, thanks to his teammates that gave him enough run support, including Hanley Ramirez, who blasted 2 home runs on the day as the Dodgers topped the Pirates 12-2. And now moving over to the KBO this time, we had all 4 games take place on Sunday as the Lotte Giants crushed the Doosan Bears for the 2nd straight day 14-5, with the Nexen Heroes beating the LG Twins 8-4 and the Hanwha Eagles win one over the SK Wyverns 9-3. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the red-hot NC Dinos take on the Kia Tigers. Of course, going into the game here in the 2nd inning of the game, Lee Ho-jun to lead off the inning sends one to deep left center field. That one is out of here, and it's 1-0 NC Dinos. But check this out, bottom of the 2nd inning, Kim Da-won to lead off for Kia. Deja vu, a home run over the left center field wall, and we're tied 1-1. Not done yet, Lee Dae-hyung this time, an RBI single to right, and Kia has the lead 2-1. 3rd inning, more from Kia. Lee Bum-ho this time singles to center. Red Pill scores and it's 3-1 before Park Geunhye makes it 4-1 with an RBI single to left field. Gonna go over to the 7th inning. Kia up 6-1. Lee Jong-wook singles to right. Deficit cut to 6-2, but it's Ji Seok-kun, the next batter, who drills this ball to deep center field. Gone a 3-run shot, and it's now 6-5. Despite the late rally, the Kia Tigers would hang on to beat the NC Dinos 6-5. And moving over to football this time, where the South Korean U23 team went up against Kuwait to commemorate the opening of the Incheon Asiad main stadium in a friendly. In a remarkable match from some of the top young footballers in the nation, as Kim Seung-dae opened up the scoring for Korea with a goal in the 20th minute. But after getting up a goal in the 39th minute, things went quiet from there as the match looked to be ending in a draw. But in the 90-plus minute, Korea draws a penalty as Chang Hyun-soo finds the back of the net, giving Korea the 2-1 victory. And now finishing things off, but staying in football, as Qatar's 2022 World Cup continues to get its share of controversies, as England's The Sunday Times reported that they have evidence of their bribery. According to the Sunday Times, they have emails, letters, and bank transactions which prove that Qatar has bribed their way into gaining the rights to host the 2022 World Cup. They added that the bribe money comes out to $5 million. Meanwhile, earlier last month, FIFA President Sepp Blatter acknowledged that it was a mistake giving Qatar the rights to the 2022 World Cup, but failed to mention what he plans to do. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, the whole nation had a scorching weekend. High in Daegu soared to 37 on Saturday, and a heat wave advisory was issued in some areas. Well, good news is, though, we'll finally get some relief today. Clouds will stick around throughout the day, and rain is on the way. So nationwide showers are expected into tomorrow. The showers are starting from the southern provinces, then expanded to the rest of the country. country. And here in Seoul, we are expecting to receive 5 to 20 millimeters of precipitation in the afternoon hours. So have your small umbrella ready before heading out to work today. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul is starting out at 22 and the high will rise to 26, while Daegu and Gwangju peak to 27 and 22, and Busan should see a high of 24 later in the afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju and Daejeon will reach 24 and 25. Dokdo should see a high of 25, and Gyeonggang tops out at 19. Well, that's all for me at this hour, but I'll be back with more updates after 10.
Thank you very much, Gianna. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour, but Korea Today is coming up in about half an hour's time, and we'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.